Thank you for listening to a new episode of the Business of Fun podcast. I am your less than humble host, Dave. My guest today is Jacob Hicks, and we are going to talk about sales and the sales process. This is a great one. I think you're going to dig it. Jacob has some new ideas, some new approaches from the common sort of thing you get. So this one you're going to enjoy. Before we get to my conversation with Jacob, though, let me push you to check out my website, davewakeman.com, where you can find my blog. You can sign up for some newsletters. You can find the store. You can get everything. As I release this and record this, we're at the end of July. I'm going to put out some stuff around Labor Day. So you're going to want to sign up for the newsletters. You're going to want to consistently visit the website to make sure you don't miss a gosh darn thing. So that's www.davewakeman.com. Also, I'm looking to book some guests for the fall. So if you have some topics that you'd like to hear, some suggested guests, or you just want to say hello, you can send me an email. It is my name. It is Dave at davewakeman.com. So Jacob Hicks is a sales trainer, sales coach. He is a super nice guy. And we had a really great conversation about the sales process. We talked about what it takes to master sales now. We talk about the role of persuasion. We talk about generating insights, dealing with rejection, mindset, how do you measure the right things. We talk about retreat points in the sales process and kind of knowing how to keep a sale alive. We talk about having systems in place, vision, success, sustainable success, work hard, play hard, intention, the 80-20 rule, a whole lot more. I mean, this was like a really, I think, a fun conversation for me to have, and it's one that I believe you're going to learn something from. So here's my conversation with Jacob on the Business of Fun. All right. I'm excited to talk to Jacob Hicks here on the Business of Fun today. Jacob, man, how are you doing?
Doing great, Dale. Thank you so much for having me. Been looking forward to it.
Yeah, I have been looking forward to this too because number one, we're going to talk about sales.
Yeah.
Number two, it's like you bring a unique point of view to sales, which I think will be very beneficial to people. So I want to start out with like a simple one, which is like a setup for like not being simple at all.
Yep.
Can you define what you mean by sales mastery? When we, because when we're going through back and forth, we were just like, oh, I want to talk about sales and, what does it mean to be, a really good salesperson and have like a level of sales mastery today? Because I know that in my years, it's changed, so I'm curious, like what does it mean right now? And what does it mean to you?
So, well, for me, I guess I would kind of break it up into two different parts. So for me, I really believe that sales is leading first with like, do I understand what the person across from me is really trying to get at? What are their goals, their drivers? What are they really trying to achieve here today? And then trying to present your solution, your product, your service, whatever it is, in a persuasive way that makes sense for them. But then also being able to say like, hey, I really don't think this makes sense for you because of X, Y, and Z, or I think you need to go with this instead of me today, and having those kind of like truly like consultative conversations.
Okay. So let me ask you this then, because I think for a lot of my audience too, the persuasion aspect that you just talked about can kind of overwhelm people,
yes.
Right? And they feel like sales is like all about persuasion. I think that my point of view falls a little bit more in line with yours, which is that like persuasion, sure. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and that's, you need to raise awareness, you need to create demand. But if you're really like hardcore persuading people, I think you're missing something. Mm-hmm. How much of a percentage of the sales conversation now is persuasion, and how much of it, from your point of view, really should focus on the solution?
So honestly, in my point of view, I really don't think it should be all that much. I mean, I feel like that might be kind of counterintuitive. Like, I don't know that, like you kind of said, like if you're coming in super hard hitting, and what I would kind of call is like hardcore selling, meaning that you are coming in, you are saying, hey, here's what I do, here's what it is, here's what it could do for you. And then you start objection handling, saying, well, I don't have the money. Okay, well, how about this? I don't have the time. Well, okay, how about this? Well, send me an email. Okay, well, what's an email going to do for you? Like, that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's kind of what people think of when they think of sales a lot of the time. But in my opinion, if you are doing things well and you are truly at your core trying to serve the person across from you, then ultimately I think it should be leading towards your solution, meaning that you are providing good insight, you're providing good information, not necessarily, and when I say good information, I don't mean information that is just about your solution and about who you are, but I mean about like the trials and the struggles that the person across from you might be having, and seeing if those things are resonating. Because if your typical problems you're solving with your product or service aren't resonating with that person across from you, then they're probably not the right fit for you. So like ultimately you need to like lead with good insight, lead with good information, and then ultimately if those things are resonating, then not in a truly persuasive way, but like just presenting your solution as a fix for their problem that has hopefully resonated up to this point in the conversation, then they'll kind of persuade themselves, I guess, in a way where they say like, okay, well, what he has said and what the insights he's provided have been really, really good, and the solution makes a lot of sense. So why wouldn't I go with it?
One thing that struck me, right, is you were talking about insights. Yeah. Because that's something that I have been telling people for, God, longer than I'd like to admit now. And I'm curious because I know that like I have a way of developing insights, and it's a lot of like really like being in the market, studying, because at heart, I'm trained as a marketer, right?
Yeah.
I may be an effective salesperson, but my training is in strategy and marketing. And so I'm really good at market research. I'm curious, like, how do you develop insights? Because I know that there's more than really one or two ways to do it, and everybody has a little bit of different approach.
Yeah, so I think you're on the right track where you talk about being in the market, right? Like you need to listen to people. So the way that, and this kind of goes back to kind of one of my strategies I talk through a lot with my coaching clients, is like how to follow up effectively. And it's coming from value. So at the end of the day, what questions are you getting from your clients or your potential clients most often? And those are the questions you want to start looking for, and then start building some like a larger picture around those things. So for example, if like, okay, let me give you like just kind of an easy example here. So if one of the, if you're like a social media marketer, for example, and like I feel like a super common question those folks are getting all the time, well, how much should I be posting on Facebook? How much should I be posting on Instagram? All of that kind of stuff, right? So you start to answer that kind of a question, and you say, well, and I mean, I've talked to a lot of those folks on my podcast and other podcasts, and a lot of the time that question is answered to, well, you need to show up consistently. And you start asking those kind of questions in your discoveries, and like, okay, well, I'm a social media marketer, so how often are you posting consistently? And like having those kind of insights and saying, okay, well, and like I'm just making this stuff up, but in my example here, saying, well, in my business, folks that post consistently 1 time a week see these kinds of results, and folks that post 3 times a week see this kind of result, and people that try to start their reels, for example, with like a really strong hook or have like a really value-driven message, see these kinds of results. And start to see again what kind of information like resonates with them, and hopefully. Like there's a really, really great book on this that's like super common in sales. I'm sure you probably talked about it before. It's called The Challenger Sale. I highly recommend it to anybody. And they talk about some of these things too, but like find those insights, and what they talk about in that book is you don't want to provide insights where there's like, oh yeah, I've thought about that before. Oh yeah, I've thought about that before. Like, and that's okay. But ultimately what you're doing as a salesperson when you get that kind of a result is you are building a relationship, which is good, right? You want to have good relationships, obviously, hopefully with your clients, your potential clients. But what you really want to drive towards is you want to kind of have an aha moment where they say, oh, I hadn't thought about it like that before. Because that's again, presenting new information and providing value to them at the end of the day.
That 100% makes sense to me. It's, there's like, the how often should I do things? And I know that was a made up example too. It's I'm always like, the context matters, because whatever you're doing, it has to be specific to you. And, and that's you. And to me, that's the approach I take with insights as well. It's like, I probably know a lot of like useless stuff, right? But I probably also know 1 or 2 things that are really important to you, so like, to me, the ability to create insights is the ability, like you said, to build really strong relationships. And I think that this is my impression, and I may be wrong, is that too often we've created this culture in sales, or just in business actually, where we don't focus enough on the relationships, right? And that we don't spend that time with building that connection, understanding the pain points, kind of just creating those human moments, I think is like the easiest way of putting it. Is my impression accurate? And if so, like, how do you advise people, to like balance, right? Because I mean, there's balance. Like, you can't just be sitting there like, having coffee and like hanging out. You do need to progress the sale. But how do you teach people to strike that balance?
So, this is another. I'm a huge reader, so I'm probably going to reference a whole bunch of books here. But one of my favorite books that I just finished again recently, I think everybody in business and sales and whatever else should read, is Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0. Huge fan of that. But what they talk about a lot in that book is like what makes a company great. And I think as a salesperson, as an entrepreneur, even if you're just solo by yourself, you are a business, right? Even if it's, again, just you doing your thing. And I think when it comes to relationships, something that we can really lose sight of is the vision, meaning that we talk about these strategies, we talk about the tactics, right? And it can be so easy to get caught in those things, but we really have to start with the vision. And at the end of the day, when we are building relationship with a potential client or a future client or, a past client or whatever, obviously it can be really great and fun to like, kind of shoot the breeze, where it's like, hey, how are your kids doing? Are you guys going on vacation this summer? How's the dog doing? Like all that kind of stuff, right? Like that's fun information, and that can be a piece of it, but I think it needs to be a smaller piece, and sometimes we give it credit for. Like, we think that a relationship is, again, just kind of smoking and joking and like just having a good time. That's all well and good. But at the end of the day, we are business people doing business activities, hopefully. And if we were having a business meeting with somebody, we have to keep, especially as a salesperson, we have to keep their vision in mind. Meaning, okay, especially I would say, if you are in an industry that is a longer sales cycle with a lot of people that can say yes and no to you, like in the company, meaning you have to get a lot of people on board. So you have to say like, okay, right now I'm meeting with the CFO. So what is this person's like real priority in the company right now? And how can like my service or product solve this problem for them? And then you can kind of customize your pitch to them. Then like, okay, well, I'm meeting with like a bunch of key account managers. Okay, well, how can I change my pitch for them? Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure you are keeping the ultimate vision of both like what you are trying to solve, but then also what you are solving for each individual person in mind too. And I think if you keep those things in mind and keep that as a priority, then you will ultimately build a really strong business relationship with them.
And what it sounds like to me, you stop me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
is that a lot of this is just helping people understand how to shift their mindset, the way they think about these things. And framing things that's like a marketing thing that's really helpful. And how do you help people understand these different mindsets? Because I find that one of the key challenges in sales is kind of they feel like there's an adversarial mindset involved, when it's really like more of a collaborative mindset, in my opinion. But I know mindset plays such a huge positive and negative role in sales. So how do you deal with that?
So when I would talk about the mindset piece of it, it's kind of a both and situation. So for example, like I've worked with sales professionals specifically who are looking to try to get to that next level. They're trying to make President's Club. They're trying to do a little bit better in their company, whatever the case might be, right? So a lot of the time when we are working through, and I kind of mentioned like strategies and tactics, right? It's like like an example here of a strategy is, hey, I want to do a lot more cold calling, and I think that's going to generate me more business. But my product, I'm not going to actually call people on the phone. I'm a traveling salesperson, so I'm going to pop into different offices or hospitals or whatever, whatever your product or service is. I'm going to do a lot more cold calling that way. So like, okay, that's my strategy. So what are my tactics? Well, I got to get past the the front office person or the front desk lady, or I'm going to start leaving some leave behinds back then. Or I'm like a personal favorite of mine. I'm a huge fan of handwritten cards of different forms. Yeah. I love that. I don't think people do it enough. So like there's some different strategies and tactics, right? Now those all can work. All of those things can work, but it comes down to the mindset piece of it. So it's like in the salesperson specifically, like what are the struggles or the beliefs that they have around those different strategies and tactics? And then it's all about iteration, meaning that, okay, I've never cold called before. I've never talked to anybody in this hospital. And I'm gonna do a handwritten card because I'm trying to win over the first sale I have to make is I'm trying to win over this front desk person. I want this person to be a huge advocate for me in the office, right? So I'm going to write her or him a handwritten card. I'm going to leave some donuts or something. I'm going to leave this, great flyer with information or whatever. And, and then it's iterating again and again, saying, okay, is this working? How is it working? What kind of results am I seeing? Am I getting past the front desk person? Am I not? And it's gathering data really at the end of the day, saying like, okay, you can't just do it like 4 or 5 times and think, okay, that didn't work or that did work, so I'm going to do it forever now. You have to build enough data. You have to get enough data set to say, okay, that didn't work because of X, Y, and Z, I think. So this next time I'm going to try A, B, and C and try those different things. So you have to, the mindset piece that I always recommend to folks is the experimentation mindset. Mm-hmm. It's where at the end of the day, all of it is an experiment. And the nice thing about experimentation is that experiment cannot fail. Our hypothesis can be wrong, meaning that experimentation will always give us information and data is always, always good. And then we can just change our hypothesis and hopefully something will change and do a little better result next time.
Yeah, that's interesting the way you put that with the hypothesis, because that's usually where I start from, right? It's like, what's the question I'm trying to answer? Like, what's, what am I trying to solve?
Yeah.
And then, and the way I look at it is there's like no bad information, no bad data. You just learn how not to do something, right? And probably you learn more than that because like maybe you've learned that, the insight or the idea that you're bringing to the world is wrong, right? And, there's like so many things. I can't stress that enough of how great the idea of starting with a hypothesis. Like, if I cold call, what's my rate of hit on this, right? Because I mean, this is something I teach people, and I'm like, please do this differently, right? Because I was like, if you don't answer the phone. And I don't answer the phone. Jacob, I'm assuming you don't really answer the phone like I don't if I don't know who it is. Why would you expect anybody else to? So then if you're making 100 cold calls every day and nobody's answering, then why don't you figure out some other way to do things, right? It's just a hypothesis.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's just trying different things and seeing what's – at the end of the experimentation, trying different things and being willing to try things and being willing to be wrong too. Yeah.
So – and what that led me to thinking about, right, is it seems to me there's two ideas in the heart of that. Number one is like, trying new things requires you to bust out of a comfort zone.
Yes.
Right. And get through that. And then the other thing about it is like, and if you're trying new things and you don't know if they're going to work, there's a certain amount of rejection involved. And, you kind of have to deal with that. Am I correct? I mean, yes, because you're nodding your head, yes. But when I approach it, how do you approach it? How do you approach that? And how do you teach people to deal with them?
So, you're absolutely right. I mean, rejection, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know. I feel like it's heavily implied in sales. Like you're going to be rejected. People are going to tell you no to some degree.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like rejection and trying these new things, the way that I always think about it is like, what does it really look like to be successful, right? Now, there's kind of two sides to this coin here, right? So the first one is going to be kind of a reframe piece. So like, for example, let's say that we think that we'll generate more business if we start to go out to like more networking events, right? But like maybe we're like pretty nervous about networking. So what does success really look like? So success can be like, I went to this networking event, I talked to everybody and their dog, and I got a gazillion phone numbers, right? Great. That can be success. Absolutely. But success can also be much smaller than that. Success can be, hey, I went to this event. I was super nervous about it. It was really, really hard for me, but I went. That can be success. Success can also be like a smaller iteration of that. It can be, I went to this networking event. I was really nervous about it. I talked to one person. I think it went okay. I did not get a phone number or anything like that, right? So like these small iterations, those can all be drivers to success. And it's really like figuring out what those things are. But then when it comes to rejection and ultimate, like hopefully closing more business, I want to make sure that we are measuring the right things. So another, like really, like I said, I've already talked about a bunch of books, but another book that I really love is The 4 Disciplines of Execution. And they talk about lead versus lag measures. And this was the first time I'd kind of like thought about this in my sales career. So oftentimes in sales, when we are talking about success and the ultimate drivers and the things that we're actually measuring, it is the, like, how much business have I closed? How many units have I sold? How much, new revenue have I generated? Like that kind of thing. All important things to measure, right? But when it comes to what we should be actually measuring in the day-to-day of our sales business, it's the lead measures. So for example, like just making up numbers here, let's say for every 5 appointments that we go on, we close 1 deal. And for every 5 calls or, door knocks or whatever we're doing to generate leads, for every 5 of those, we generate one appointment. That means that for every 25 calls or whatever we're doing, we generate 1 closed piece of business. So if it were me, I would be measuring the 25 calls. So how many calls can I do, and how can I start to uptick that? So for every 4 calls, I get an appointment. For every 3 calls, I get an appointment. So start measuring those things, and ultimately that will lead us to the actual point that we want to get to.
Yeah. I'm curious about this because how I teach people to think about it, and again, I don't do any sales training or very little at this point. Yeah. I still get people calling me like, "Oh, you're like the best sales trainer we ever had." And I was like, I think it's because I didn't think of, I didn't think about it as sales. I was like I brought it from a marketing standpoint. But and this is a marketing idea. It's the next logical step.
Yeah.
Right. When you did something, did it help you move to the next logical step? Mm-hmm. And why is that? Why? Yes. Really, why did it, or why not? And because I hear hints of that in there, right? It's like this. Really, I think if I had to take away one key from what we've talked about so far, which I think is super important, is that context matters.
Yes.
So like, how does that work, in regards to you? Like, is that like similar to your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, context is really, really huge, right? Because if I'm working with somebody who's been in sales for 20 years, that's great. And like, they're going to have like one level of, mindset compared to somebody else who's never done sales before.
Certainly.
So the context is going to be like absolutely key over the long term. And it kind of comes back to like the rejection piece too. So like when I'm coaching people through like just getting used to being rejected, there's a strategy that I kind of call my retreat point, meaning that if you and I are sitting across a table and I'm trying to close you for business or whatever we're trying to do, right? And I'm just getting objection versus objection, like all that kind of stuff is like, for me to still have a win at the end of the day, like what is a retreat point that I can move to? Meaning that you're like, hey, like this does not make sense. I'm not going to buy stuff from you today. Like, it's just not going to happen, right? And it's like, okay, well, what's my next step? Is to ask more questions. Okay, we're still getting shut down. Okay, well, at the end of the day, is it okay if I stay in touch with you? Like, would you be offended if I stayed in touch with you? And most of the time, people are not going to be offended if you just stay in touch with them, assuming you're not harassing them and calling them every day, right?
Yeah.
So like, what is like the ultimate like retreat point that you can stay on and still get that win at the end of the day? So I think that's really the kind of the context that we need to shift to, as opposed to just saying like, hey, if I don't close you right here and now, then everything is awful and like I'm a terrible salesperson and like I should just quit and go work at Walmart.
Suck.
Yes,
yes,
right.
Exactly. It sounds a little bit like again, these are all like all the marketing stuff. And like, I think if you're a really good salesperson, you come at it with like a little bit of strategy and a bit of marketing. It's the minimum and maximum. What's the minimum that I can achieve? And what's the maximum? The maximum is always like going, if they give me a check, it's amazing.
Right. Yeah. Cash in hand, ready to go.
Oh yeah, exactly. Now let me ask you about, there's something that hasn't come up necessarily. But what about, there's a certain amount of chaos in the sales process. And how do you deal with that?
So this is probably one of my favorite strategies like ever, because I think there's chaos in whether you're a salesperson or, working professional or mom at home or anything else. Like there's always going to be chaos in your life. Okay. So what I always suggest to folks, I'm a really big believer in time blocking. Meaning that from 9 to 10, I'm doing my prospecting calls. From 10 to 11, I'm getting back to emails or whatever. From 11 to 12, I'm putting a presentation together, whatever it is, right? I'm a huge believer in time blocking, and some folks read that as I have to time block from the moment that I wake up to the moment that I go to bed. That works for some people. For me, what's worked best is kind of a hybrid model where like I have like my big appointments and like the big projects or big tasks I'm trying to get done scheduled out. And then the rest of it is just kind of like go with the flow. But one of my favorite strategies I mentioned before is what I call chaos time, where it kind of get it from the name, I guess, a little bit. But like I've done this for years now, I guess at this point. So in my afternoon from 2 to 3, I have a time block called chaos time. Now that is exactly what you would call it. So for like your salespeople, you're going to have, and anybody listening, I'm sure you can probably do this right off the top of your head, but there are probably, a good 2, 3, 5 clients that are just kind of a hassle, meaning that they call you every single week. They have the newest fire, like their house is burning down. You're the only person that can solve it, and please solve it right for me right now, right now, right now. For those people, I put them into the chaos time, meaning that they were not in my schedule. I was not expecting their call. And it's not a huge task for me to deal with, but it is another thing to keep in my head to get done. Mm-hmm. So in that chaos time, those are the folks that I'm going to deal with that I was not expecting to do. Now, a more advanced version of this is, let's say you're doing this for a few weeks, it's going well, you're putting people in your chaos time, it's saving the rest of your days, protecting the rest of your time. Now, more advanced is to do what I call an audit, meaning that for like a week or maybe 2, for every single piece of your chaos time, you write down everything that comes up, every person that comes up, and start to look for patterns, meaning that, hey, 2 out of my 5 days a week during my chaos time, I'm dealing with John Smith. He's got some other thing that he needs me to deal with, whatever it's like for information, whatever the thing is. So that way you can actually tuck a time block out for John Smith, saying like, hey, I know John's probably going to call me a couple of times this week. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm going to schedule 30 minutes in my calendar to deal with his probable issues, right? Mm-hmm. So again, that'll sort of protect your time and also to protect your chaos time. So because at the end of the day, I mean, everybody has this, right, where you get to the end of the week, it's Friday at 5 o'clock, and you're like, man, I could use an extra day just to get all the stuff done that I didn't think I had time for the rest of the week. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is protect our time during the week and make our time productive too.
Oh, chaos time I'm probably going to steal.
I love it.
Because and it's true. It's like, it's always like, it's 20% of the people, right? The 80-20.
Yep. Yes.
Definitely a prize when it comes to chaos time. There's like 2 or 3 people who are like going, everything is an emergency. Everything is a problem. Everything is falling apart. And Dave, you're the only one that can fix it. And I'm like, going, I appreciate that, but I'm going, and I don't believe it's true, but I'm going to help as much as I can. This is amazing. All right. So chaos is amazing. How do you do? So I'm curious about the systems, right? Because chaos time is part of a system.
Yeah.
And I want to ask the question in a specific way because I know that it's easy the way we're talking about it right now. But like sometimes sales sucks.
Yes.
And so how do you build these systems and how do you teach people to put systems in place that kind of help them drive them forward, even if they don't want to sell? Because I mean, that's, if I'm being honest with people, and why wouldn't I be? Because they trust me enough to listen to this thing. It's like sometimes I struggle it's because like, if I'm not careful about the time blocking and building in time into my schedule for it, I'll just forget. I'll just neglect it. It won't be I'll forget it. I'll just neglect it. And then 2 or 3 days go and I don't, and again, my numbers are different than everybody else, but it's just like, I got a list of like people I keep in touch with. I got a group of people I want to, get to know better. And I want to, I start reaching out to those people, right? It's not like a complex thing. It's like 1 or 2, it's 5 or 6 people, like, touch points a day. It's not impossible. It's just neglect. So yes. How do you build those systems? Because again, I need this. This is for me.
So, I mean, I'm a huge fan of time blocking. So actually, the way that I think about it personally is it's like, would you show up late or would you just ignore an appointment that was on your calendar with another person? Like, hey, such and such person wants to could do business with me or wants to do business with me, but you know what? I'm not going to do it. Never mind. I'm not going to go on that. Like, you're probably not, right? Like, if you're like an honest person trying to grow your business or trying to, boost your sales, like, you're not going to just ignore those kind of appointments, right? So why would you honor that appointment, but you're not willing to honor an appointment with yourself? Meaning that from 9 to 10, 9 to 9:30, I am getting my emails out. I'm reaching out to those 4 or 5 people. They're like my high value potential prospects or whatever. Like, why would you not do that? And now there's kind of a couple of strategies that I always recommend to folks. The first, and when it comes, is like the chaos can get really heavy, right? Like, it's been a crazy busy week. Like, I don't like, it's just a lot going on, right? Like, I mean, it's just hectic, right? What I always strongly suggest to people is whatever like is generally kind of your lighter day, maybe it's like a Tuesday or a Friday or whatever day it is, time block at least an hour every week if you can manage it to work on your business versus working in your business. Meaning, that if you are a salesperson, most of the week, you're probably going to be out there selling, grinding, prospecting, following up, all of the main stuff, right? Very important to do all that stuff, all that activity. But you also want to schedule time in your calendar with yourself or with your manager or with your coach or whatever to say, like, okay, what is actually working? Like, is this prospecting working? Is it not working? And actually figuring out some of those things. Now those are like what I call tactical strategies. Now, the next thing I'm gonna recommend to folks, which I feel like we don't talk about nearly enough in the business world in general, particularly in sales, is to sit down and be authentically yourself and put together your vision for your life. Meaning that, okay, in 5 years and 10 years, what do I want my life to look like? And not just in terms of like business stuff, but just in general. Meaning that, like, okay, I want to, maybe I'm single right now. I want to be, hopefully I'm going to be, married, find out my significant other, or maybe I'll have a couple of kids. I want my house to look like this. And those are all important things, but dive into it deeper than that, saying, okay, what does like an ideal day in my life in 5 years from now actually look like? And what is it, more importantly, what does it feel like? Because those are the things like, hey, it's been a slow couple of months. I'm grinding. Like, I'm starting to wonder, like, can I even do this? Have I lost my edge? Like, what's wrong with me? Why isn't this happening? Those are the things that are ultimately going to drive you forward, because you are ultimately doing the activity that's going to get you that life that you ultimately say that you want. Not that you're just, hey, I hit quota this quarter. Hey, I'm made President's Club. All great things to do, but as long as you're driving towards the ultimate vision, that's what's really going to help you get through the slumps and the hard times.
Yeah. I have found that to be completely apt, right? It's like, because a lot of times if you're just doing this thing, if you're grinding, as people say, that's sort of a, you're productive without, or how do I put it? You're effective or efficient without being effective. That would be the best way of putting it, right? And so there's no straight lines, right, in business, right? And this is definitely a lesson I teach people, so you have to find something that's going to pull you through those kind of tough periods, because everybody deals with them. Everybody struggles, right? And I think that, like, the way you talked about it, what does success look like as a person? Super important, because I don't think people learn, they don't get taught that, right? And then I think that what happens is you end up accepting things the way they are and not the way you want them to be, right? Because this is something I teach people a lot of. I was like going, just because that's the way it's always been done, that's probably the root cause of your issue. Because if you're just doing it because that's the way it's done, if it's not working for you, then why just stop?
Yeah, well, and again, it comes down to defining like what success means for you. Because it could be like, hey, I'm a young 20-something guy that just got out of school, and I'm willing to grind my butt off, right? Because I have nothing else to do. So I'm just gonna like work super, super hard. But then like in your 30s and 40s, maybe again you're settling down, got a couple of kids. So maybe success looks like, hey, I'm gonna make 20% less money this year, but I'm gonna spend 100% more time with my family. Like maybe that means a ton more success. So like actually taking the time to sit down and think about those things is really important.
Yeah, somebody said, "Oh, like how do you scale this thing?" And I go, scaling for me at this point is like being able to coach my son's soccer team.
Yeah,
and people were just like, kind of like, I don't understand. And I go, well, you got to think about this stuff, right? This matters, right? And I was like, well, and there's points where you can definitely hump, and there's points where you can't or don't want to, and you just have to be in control of that. And I think it is a super important lesson that we don't talk about nearly enough. And I think that that probably leads to this idea that I know you're fond of talking about too, which is about creating sustainable success. Because I think that again, it's like the design. It's not the design of a sales job in particular. It's kind of the design of like how a lot of society ends up. It's like we think about it as all or nothing. And there's like, it's more like to me, it's like your thermostat on your air conditioner, right? And it's like, where are you comfortable, at this point, right? Like, if it's the middle of the winter, right? You're in Iowa, I'm in DC, so it gets colder in Iowa. And
It does.
You're gonna
Okay,
have
that's good to know.
Yeah, DC doesn't get that cold. So when you come visit, it'll be like probably better. But it's still hot as hell at both places, so we don't win in the summer. We're stuck. But you want to control the temperature. The temperature is going to be comfortable for you. Then is different, right? Like now, I was talking about the heat wave. If I let the house go YOLO, tomorrow it's going to be 100 degrees inside the house. Me and Penny the bulldog are not going to be happy.
Right.
My wife's going to have checked into a hotel.
Yes. Well, I think you really hit the nail on like this. The sustainable lifestyle, because again, it can change, right? Because again, like we kind of talked about like the seasons of grinding, right? Like you got to get up early, you got to work hard, you got to put in those, 10, 12, 14-hour days. But the thing that I feel like we can miss so often, particularly in our society, is that we just kind of think like that's the norm. Like that's what we have to do forever and ever and always and always. And that's just not the case. Like most of the time, at least in my experience, like in my personal life, and also working with other folks, is those grinding times are often a season, and we have to kind of have an endpoint in our mind saying like, okay, I'm going to show up, I'm going to work 14-hour days, I'm going to have zero social life, I'm going to go to work and go to bed, and that's going to be the two things I get to do today, right? And it's like, okay, but if I'm not seeing X, Y, and Z result by, end of December, by January, by whatever, time and date, then maybe it's time to reevaluate things. It kind of harkens back to what I found a lot in my sales career when I was working for other folks. It's that we will talk about things being better, and we won't really evaluate whether things are good. Meaning, like, kind of going back to like your example of like a thermostat, right? Like if it's freezing cold outside, if it's 35 degrees in your house, and we take it up to 36 degrees, well, things have gotten better, but things aren't good, So actually sitting down to evaluate those things to see like, okay, am I actually enjoying my life? Because if you're not enjoying your life, then I mean, like, what are we even building? Just a bunch of money to sit on later? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, you gotta put a little bit of life into the life.
Yes.
And the way I describe it to people, I go, again, because it's like a mindset thing that I think it just permeates. It's not, it's not anybody's fault, or it's just the way. It's like it's a pattern, and if you don't interrupt the pattern, then the pattern just runs uninterrupted, because that's the way it goes. It's like, how long can you sprint for?
Yeah,
because that's what you're talking about, right? These seasons of grinding, which I think is great. It's like, how long can you sprint for? And so is it better to plan your sprint and say like, look, for this month, this is all I'm going to do. I'm going to freaking bang this stuff out. Then you could probably sustain that. But if you say I'm going to do it indefinitely, then I think you've set yourself up for failure. And it comes back to that thing. It's better versus good.
Yes.
It's like going, it might be better, but is it good?
Right. When I was going to say too, like there's a strategy I work with, and I need to come up with a better name for it. But right now I'm calling it WPR&I, where like I feel like we talk about a lot in the workforce and like in sales and everything, where like we work hard and we play hard, right? Very common thing. Like you grind for a quarter, you work really hard, you hit your quota. Now we're going to have a party, and then guess what? You get to do it again. That's so exciting, right? But I feel like it's what I realized I was missing in my life, and what other folks have realized they're missing in theirs is the intentionality piece, right? We need to work with intention. We need to play with intention. But then we also, the R piece, we also need to rest with intention, meaning that we need to, like, as best as we can, try to find at least like a day or afternoon or something that we can actually set aside to recharge and do all of this with intentionality. Because like you said, like there's a reason that in the Olympics, they have a 100-meter sprint, right? They have a 200-meter sprint, and they don't have like the 14-mile sprint, right? Like it's just not a thing because people can't do it for that long. So you need to do it all with intentionality to make sure that you are, again, building the life that you ultimately want to live.
Yeah. And the rest piece is so important, because I'm like going, it's okay to take a little time off. It's okay to put down the phone and not get to the email.
Yes.
I don't. It was funny because I forgot about this, but my wife was telling me the other day when we were in New York, she goes, this is the place where you told me, like, oh, if you're just going to be on your phone all the time, then just don't even bother.
Yes.
And she was like that. And I was like going, well, it's true. Like, if we're like out hanging out, then like, who's more important than me? It's the way, and so that's just busting, that's busting my wife's chops a little bit. But I think you have to take that sort of mindset, right? Because it's really about protecting yourself, right?
Yes.
It is totally okay to have your cup of coffee and like stare off into the distance. Totally acceptable. It's like I told you before we started recording, I was like, what? The weather's really nice today in DC. It's going to be just super hot the next couple of days. I'm thinking about like, how can I get done with my day so I can go just sit out in the sun and drink a beer on a patio because it's going to be super hot, right? And just stare off into the distance. Maybe take my son with me and go like, what? Get yourself some, chicken tenders. He's 15 now. I don't know if he's going to want chicken tenders, but that's fine. Either way, and these things are important. They need to happen.
Yeah, well, and I think kind of what you were, let me know if I'm wrong here, but I think kind of what you were mentioning with like the example with your wife and like some of these things is I think ultimately what's so easy to lose sight of is our own personal boundaries, right? Where we have to again, there's going to be days where we have to grind, right? Mm-hmm. But hopefully we can honor ourselves to the point and say like, hey, like I've got a, really big, date with my wife at, 6:00 tonight. So at 5:00, I'm shutting the phone off. That's a boundary, right? So like, hey, and most of the time it's totally fine. Like there's not going to be a fire that we get at 5:15 that we have to deal with by 5:30 or the whole world is going to explode. I really hope I don't get that email, right? But like we have to be willing to set those
qualified
boundaries.
To deal with that.
Yes, email, yeah. I'm really not. Hopefully, I'm not calling Jacob Hicks, the sales coach, to deal with that.
Even though my son, he sometimes tells me like I would be qualified for it. I don't feel qualified. It is 100%. It is 100% true. And the flip side of that, of like the story I told about Catherine was, like she will now go like when we're together and doing stuff, she won't she'll spend very little, if any, time on her phone, right? And it's just like you said, boundaries, right? And you kind of fall into patterns. You have to interrupt the pattern.
Yeah.
And if the pattern can be I think patterns sometimes, there are bad patterns. There are obviously bad patterns. There are obviously good patterns. What I do think is that both of them, they can be neither. They can be not good or bad. But if you aren't the one controlling them, they can become toxic either way. Yes. Right? Too much, too much spinach is too much spinach. Yes. Right? Yeah. Just like too much cake is too much cake.
Yeah, well, and like one of my favorite quotes around this kind of whole conversation is "Nothing changes if nothing changes," like from John Deloney. Like you have to be willing to change things to see ultimately like you said before, there can be good and bad patterns, and some of them are just kind of neutral. They just are, right? Yeah. But something I learned early on in this in my working life is the difference between fault and responsibility, right? Yeah. Like we might have created this pattern, or like something might have happened to us and it's not our fault, right? But ultimately it is our responsibility, meaning that even though this kind of pattern has kind of cropped up in our life through no fault of our own, it is our responsibility to take ownership of that and be willing to say, hey, this is no longer what I want it to be, so I'm going to change it and try X, Y, and Z instead.
No, I think that's great. So let me ask you this and put you on the spot here.
Yeah, let's do it.
If I were a salesperson, listening, or somebody who's selling, because I think my philosophy is that we're all selling something in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah.
What would be like a couple things that people could do right now to get themselves focused and heading in the right direction?
So the first thing that I think, if you're a true salesperson, what I would always suggest is know your numbers. Meaning that, like kind of like the example I mentioned before, it's like, hey, for every 5 calls I make 1 appointment. For every 5 appointments I make, I sell, one of my services or whatever. So figure out what your numbers are can go a really, really long way, because if you don't know what your numbers are, then you don't know where your bottlenecks are. And you can't say like, hey, like I'm really awful at prospecting, but once I get them on the phone, then it's really, really great. So like figuring out where those bottlenecks are can ultimately be your long-term drivers. Make sure that you have hopefully if you're a salesperson, you have some form of CRM, your customer relationship manager, because that can be a huge time saver, because we want to be out selling. We don't want to be, managing a million administrative tasks in an Excel spreadsheet or whatever. So use your CRM to the best of your ability. If you're not a big technology guru, you don't have to be, but be a CRM guru. Figure out how to use your tools to the best of your knowledge. And ultimately, you kind of mentioned like the 80-20 rule, right? Like 20% or 80% of our business comes from 20% of our prospects, right? But I always recommend people take 20% of their time to try something different. meaning that, hey, I know for a fact that, door knocking is the route that I want to go for prospecting. I'm really, really great at it. I figured out all this stuff, but I heard some guy on a podcast talking about writing, handwritten notes. So I'm going to do some of those things to my high-end clients or prospects. I'm going to try some of those things, and I'm going to give it 3 months, 6 months of doing it consistently and see what kind of results I get before I decide if I want to throw it out or not.
Yeah. I dig it. And I'll tell you too, the handwritten note thing, I built an entire business off of handwritten notes. So I completely I think that it still works. I mean, I don't think it still works. I know it still works because I don't have them in arm's reach because I think they went upstairs, but I keep a box of postcards on my desk. They're Pantone 50. So there's 50 different colors in there, and it's just a postcard. It's like going, bro, I was thinking about you. Here's something you should check out, or whatever, and you send that thing off in the mail, and people love it because it's like this bright color, and it's amazing. So that's great. So now, Jacob, where can people find you on the internet to find out more? Because I think you have an assessment. Is that right?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of tools I can give some folks if they're interested in learning a little bit more. So the easiest way to find me is through my website. It's just jacobhickscoach.com. I said I got a handful of different tools on there, but make sure to check out my Growth Hub. That's where I've got like a bunch of books that I recommend. I've got a few different tools. My most recent one, I've been working with a lot of entrepreneurs lately. So I threw together what I call my entrepreneurial sales toolkit. So there's a lot of kind of the basics to kind of get people at least thinking in the right directions on how do I follow up? What kind of cadence should I be looking at? What CRM should I be looking at? How do I deal with rejection? Some of those kind of things. But otherwise, you can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn primarily too.
Perfect. Awesome. Jacob, man, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Let me know what you thought of my conversation with Jacob Hicks by sending me an email. It is my name, Dave, at davewakeman.com. Make sure you check out my website. That's davewakeman.com, www.davewakeman.com, where you will find my blog. You will find the store. You will find all kinds of stuff that will be hopefully useful, definitely helpful. And when I say hopefully, I mean they're totally useful and helpful. So check them out. DaveWakeman.com. You can sign up for the newsletters there. As I mentioned at the start, I'm looking to book out a bunch of new guests for the fall. If you have some ideas as far as topics you'd like me to cover or guests you'd like to hear from, send me an email. Or you can even just say hello, but send me an email with your topics and guest suggestions to dave@davewakeman.com, and I will see what I can do to help fill those in because I'm always looking for good ideas for guests and topics to cover. Finally, thank you so much for being here. I couldn't do this without all of you that continue to listen. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon. Take it easy.